Let me thank you for your testimony and for the work of your office and yourself. Part of the concern that many of us have is that your office, assuming and believing that there is nothing but goodwill there, doesn't have the sufficient tools to get the job done. And I would hope, and you may not want to comment on it today, but I know you've seen the legislation, but as I said in my opening statement, our hope is to empower you and empower the Secretary of State and the President, as we did with the International Religious Freedom Act. And as you know, the penalties, starting with a simple démarche onto very significant penalties, is derived verbatim from the IRFA legislation of 1998, which went through my committee and is authored by Congressman Frank Wolf, and it parallels very closely what we did on the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Both of those initiatives were strongly opposed by, especially IRFA, by the Clinton administration, but he signed it at the end of the day, both of those pieces of legislation. I know that human rights enforcement, if we assume goodwill on the part of a country, without a penalty phase becomes slim and none in most cases. And that was a lesson learned from those two landmark laws that we are trying to apply now to child abduction. If you wanted to comment on the legislation, because the new bill will be very similar to the old, but with some significant upgrades, but would you like to comment on it?
Thank you, sir. We look forward to working with you on it. We would welcome seeing the new legislation and discussing it with staff at your earliest opportunity.
I would hope you would. And I hope, because delay is denial for a left-behind parent and for a child. I mean, this legislation should move quickly. It has been delayed far too long for whatever reasons, so we really need to, on both the congressional side and the executive branch side, come to a consensus and get this done. I noted in your testimony you talked about Japan, and we're all looking forward to a ratification. I'm very concerned that the caveats and the reservations may be onerous and may lead to very few resolutions where the child is actually returned. But you noted in your testimony that it will be entered into force. It'll immediately be applicable to the U.S. situation. But yet when you talked about Korea, you said that the department needs to study the Republic of Korea's implementation of the treaty, its domestic legislation, institutions, and the like. It seems to me that Japan, with its sole custody laws and other hindrances, particularly in its family law, raises very significant barriers to a success. I'm wondering why the difference between Korea and Japan. Why isn't Korea entering into force now?
The reason is because Japan was a member of the Hague Conference when the treaty was written in 1980. And every country that was a member of the Congress, of the Hague Conference, automatically becomes a party to the convention without anyone else having to do anything.
So regardless of how infirm their laws might be?
That's the way the conference works. Korea was not a member of the Hague Conference then, and so we have to check that the central authority has proper authorities, that there is a judicial system and law enforcement to make sure that the treaty will work. So there is a big difference, and I can understand the concern.
Let me ask you, with regards to, Congress has made several requests to be informed of the number of children returned to the U.S. in 2011 and 2012, as had previously been the practice of the State Department, but we have not received a response. Do you know why?
I'm sorry, but I don't. Okay. I'll find out for you and let you know.
Okay, and more importantly, if we could get those numbers?
I'll see what I can find out.
That would be very...
I think one of the things that's important to remember is that there is always something behind the numbers. The numbers are not the complete story. And so we look forward to working with your staff.
Well, we are concerned about a breakout with actual returns and then others that are deemed resolved, but really there was no return. And that differentiation is something that would be very helpful for policymakers to know. So if you could
I'll see
include
what
that.
I can find out.
Okay. Could you get that to us? I mean,
I'll get you an answer.
let me ask you about memorandums of understanding and bilateral agreements. When I went with the Eliases to Japan, I met with members of the Diet, members of the government, our own embassy people who obviously were very empathetic. But as you know, children are not coming home from Japan. Whether the abductor be a father or a mother, it continues to be a serious problem. In the case of Michael Elias, as you know, his wife, former wife, worked for the Japanese government. And the judge, when custody was being decided, took the passports and said no travel. She went and had a duplicate set made because she worked for the government, and then whisked off with the 2 children. And as far as I know, there has been no real investigation, no penalty, no sanctioning of that young woman for that terrible act of not just abduction, but also fraud in terms of the passports. And one of the conversations, several conversations that I've had with your office and with, obviously, ambassadors around the world who are dealing, particularly in non-Hague countries, is this compelling need to have a bilateral agreement. We do it on adoption in many cases where there's gaps, even with those that have signed the intercountry adoption Hague. But with Japan, it seems to me the opportunity is ripe for an agreement. Goodwill, it only goes so far. And like I said, for Michael Elias, who was sitting there, and all the other left behind parents, delay is denial. And why not an agreement? Hammer out an agreement for a modality to work this out. You know, the British have such an agreement with Pakistan, and it works well. Patricia Appy, in her testimony, will be speaking to that later on today. I mean, it's a vehicle that will undoubtedly yield positive results. I see no downside.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you, sir. We have 3 memoranda of understanding with Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon. There is no enforcement mechanism, and we have had no returns under those memoranda. We believe that the Hague Convention provides the best opportunity for resolving these cases. And it took Japan, I think one of the problems in Japan is their belief about custody, that one parent is supposed to drop out of the child's life when there's a divorce. But we see that these things are changing and that Japan is moving to a more global understanding of what custody is and how both parents need to participate in a child's life. So we hope that when they are soon a party to the convention, we will be able to work with them on compliance and access and make sure that parents do get to see their children for more than an hour a week. I agree with you that that is not access.
But I would just say, even though the examples with Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan, I mean, Egypt obviously went from a dictatorship that was elected, but maybe falsely, under Mubarak, and I met with him every year, so I know what he was like. Morsi obviously went from bad to worse. Jordan is a good friend. Lebanon obviously has many problems. I mean, those examples, Japan and India are mature democracies with functioning parliaments. I mean, the Diet and the parliament in New Delhi, have checks and balances. It seems to me that they are major world players. They purport to follow the rule of law, and for the life of me, I can't understand why the reluctance. It could only be value added. It could only add an additional mechanism. If it brings home one child, it would be well worth the effort. I believe it would bring home many children and would start a process that might even have a chilling effect on future abductions. One of the things that Bindu will testify to, do you agree with that? That
I think that we will have better success with Japan and India when they are members of the Abduction Convention.
But again, all of the current cases with Japan are grandfathered out. And, to assume that there will be a good reservoir of goodwill created, I think, given their past is often prologue, we need some game changers. And an MOU, I believe, would do that.
I think for the cases that are not covered by the convention, that we do need to reach an agreement with Japan. I agree with you, and we will be working with them to see what we can do, and also with our partners who were incredibly helpful in working with us to persuade Japan to join the convention.
So then you would be for an agreement with Japan?
We will explore every avenue to get those children home.
Okay. Again, I would hope that the sooner that is initiated, because the agony, as you know so well, is I don't know how people, I mean, and you've met many of these people as well, as have your staff. When you sit and look them in the eyes and realize that they lose hope. One of the, again, Bindu will testify that when she went for help to our folks in India, that is to say U.S. Embassy personnel, she was told there was very little they could do because she didn't have custody. She then got custody, and she has told me, and I believe will testify to that, but she told me earlier today, because I asked her, that she still hasn't gotten help. And in your testimony, you cite a case. We're encouraged by a recent decision in the High Court of New Delhi to return a child to her country of habitual residence for final determination of custody. I mean, it's one case. I don't know what country you're talking about. Is it U.S.?
It's a return to the United States.
Oh, it is? Okay. Do you see a precedent in that?
I see hopeful signs that judges are making the right decisions.
Okay.
And we will continue to work, excuse me, to work with India to encourage them to continue to make those kinds of decisions while they write their implementing legislation to join the convention.
Okay. Again, it takes effort, but a bilateral agreement there as well could bring these two children home. I mean, based on all of the available court evidence, this man has acted, her ex-husband, with absolute impunity, and you know, which is why she is here today to testify. And so I would hope our efforts in country would be redoubled on her behalf as well. If you could commit to that, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Let me, I do have other questions, but I'll yield to my friend and then come back. Thank you, Ms. Sicily.
Thank you, Mr.